Welcome to the podcast. Before we jump into the interview, I'd like to share just some tidbits that you are going to get throughout the episode, and pay attention to these because they're really valuable for understanding how to manage your teams, how to communicate with other people in your business and your organization, and how to get the most out of people. The first is that people are generally not surprised by who they are. In other words, when you're using an assessment tool, when you show people, hey, this is who you are, does this make sense? People will generally be like, yeah, of course, that's who I am. And what I'm fascinated about with this is that people often act as if they don't have a lot of self-awareness, but people do. And again, if they're confronted in an objective way with who they are generally open to hearing what comes next. This is extremely important because if you have a problem employee, a manager that is not doing what they need to do, if you have somebody, a leader in your organization that needs some help, generally speaking, they're going to be a little bit more closed to advice, but far more open to an objective assessment of what's going on. The second thing I'd like you to pay attention to is, hold on, how do we motivate them? How do we, now that somebody knows what's going on, now that the mirror has been held up in front of them, what can they do about it? Again, people are infrequently surprised at the results. But here's the thing, if you want to motivate people, and pay attention to what's being said in the interview, if you want to motivate people, instead of telling them what to do, ask them what they can see, ask them their ideas on this. When we ask a question of individuals, we get far more out of them because now they are internally motivated to do something rather than being told what to do. Enjoy this episode. Hopefully this edition of the podcast is finding you well. I am excited to introduce Fraser Engel. I met Fraser, it's been probably about a month and a half here. A mutual acquaintance introduced us. But Fraser's been using assessment tools, objective assessment tools, for over 20 years. He is a coach and he does some really unique things. He typically helps with what companies are struggling with most, helps people understand themselves, how they come across. And that's what we're going to be focusing on for today. So maybe really quickly, Fraser, if you wouldn't mind, introduce yourself, what you do, and then we'll get into the interview here.
Yeah, Mark, thanks for the introduction and the opportunity to talk with you today. Fraser Engel. I'm a born and raised Vancouverite. I have had my own consulting company since 2000 and focusing on things like executive coaching, career transition. But at the heart of it is understanding people, which is where the assessment aspect of the business comes in.
Excellent.
Mark, I typically work with small to medium-sized companies that are in growth mode and are really kind of feeling the impact, the positive and the negative impacts of growth.
That makes so much sense. It's something that I believe we've talked about before on the podcast, but I'm excited to see your take on some of this as we get into the interview here. So you gave me a quote last time we talked. You said, coaches can't make someone 2 inches taller, but they can help make some tweaks to communication and how to manage certain aspects of themselves. So what I'd like to start off with is talking about how personality affects others around ourselves. You talked about how it's kind of like placing a mirror in front of somebody for more self-reflection. So maybe start off with that. How does personality affect us and others around us?
Well, I think one of the interesting things is, Mark, as we get older and we kind of mature from kids into adults, nobody gives us an instruction manual, right? And nobody tells us how we impact others. And it's typically through trial and error. And some people pick up on it really quickly. And some people kind of keep bumping into themselves, keep saying the same things and having the same impact and don't really figure out like why when I say that same thing, it happens over and over and over again. People react to me. Some people are curious, and that's actually a part of personality as well. And some people just keep doing what they're doing. Um, so when you can put a mirror up in front of somebody and say, because you're really assertive, let's say, this is how that impacts other people who are as assertive or perhaps not as assertive as you. Here's the impact.
So there, you mentioned two pieces there. One, you talked about somebody needs to, if they don't have enough self awareness, this helps them with the self awareness. But secondly, you said sometimes people have the curiosity to ask more questions and learn about this and then grow. So I'm guessing there are kind of two pieces. Maybe you can divide this up for me.
Yeah.
So the first of all is we need to have the self-awareness to see our impact on others. But secondly, it's do we have the curiosity to investigate that, explore that, and help people around us, help ourselves to help people around us, or do we not? So let's take the first one, because that's the one you were kind of focusing on was, yeah, we need the self-awareness. What have you seen as far as people gaining that self-awareness? Because I think that there's some fear out there where people say, I don't want to hear this. So how does an objective assessment help with that?
Yeah, that's a lot to unpack there. I think the self-awareness piece is um once again, I believe that people have a certain degree of self-awareness. They most people are curious about, their impact on others, but it's just a matter of how do you correlate that, right? How do you measure the impact of what I say and what I do and what is the impact on others, right? You using a golf analogy, Mark, I love to golf, and I was golfing with a guy and he always sliced the ball, right-handed golfer, but he was aimed super open and to the left. So I said, "Well, I'm not a golf pro, but are you interested in some feedback?" So I gave it to him. He took it, changed back to the way he always did it, and sliced it again. And so I said, "Well, why didn't you try what we talked about?" And he goes, "Well, I've always hit it like that." So he said that's the way I've always done it. So that self-awareness for him, golf into business, let's say, is I've always communicated like that to people. I've always told them what to do instead of saying, "How are you currently looking at this problem?" Right? That's I think that self-awareness, and it blends into the curiosity around if I want to take on more responsibility at work, if I want to grow, if I want to make more sales or have richer relationships with my crew, on a construction site, am I, quote, curious around trying new things, right? And
You're bringing something else into this, which I want to make sure that we cover as well a little bit. You've talked about tapping into people's natural motivations. If somebody is motivated by performance and results from that, that's going to be a different motivator than praise or simply feeling great about themselves or kind of competing against themselves. But so we'll shelf that for just a little bit. Coming back to this kind of self-awareness part that we opened up. Again, the objective assessment, what has been your reaction or what is the reaction that you've seen from people as you're coaching them when they see the results rather than just having like somebody higher than them say, hey, you're bad at this, change. If somebody can see it objectively, how does that change the way people typically take the information?
well, I think it's like going and getting an X-ray or an MRI from the doctor. It provides a level of, just objectiveness. It's real data instead of words from your manager or words from your spouse. It's like this is true and a little bit more concrete, right? As so the impact of when I walk someone through an assessment report, it's here's why this is happening. So very infrequently are people surprised at the results. That's the good thing, right? The flip side of that coin is now what do we do with that? So whether I'm curious about how I impact others or not, and then the mirror goes up and you say, here's you in a graphical representation. Here's your strong characteristics and here are your less strong characteristics. Here's what's easy for you to do, and here's what's harder for you to do. That gives people this incredible wave of understanding around, oh, I get that a lot. It's like, oh, that's why. And then you kind of clear the deck and you say, okay, well, how would this insight propel you? in a different direction, equipped with new tools and techniques, so to speak, strategies of how to deal with relationships that are not where you want them to be, or from a sales perspective, sales results that are not what you and your boss or, you know, team need out of you. That's the cool part for me.
Yeah, this is so important. And I've seen this all the time myself, where if a partner, like an intimate partner or business partner or manager or colleague says something to you, so much of the time we're looking for connotation of what they're saying. So much of the time
Mm.
we're looking for, what do they mean by this? Is this a compliment? Is this an insult? Like, what? How is this going to impact me in other ways? Where if something is objective, it's just data. Like you said, it's just data. So somebody can now almost have freedom to view it and accept it on a different level.
Yep.
And the second part of what you're talking about is, now we go, what do we do with this? And again, if somebody's open to accepting it, often you said, people will go like, oh yeah, I've seen that. I've seen how this impacts people. Now they're willing to entertain whether they can change in some way. The curiosity might be a little bit higher. Have you seen that as well?
Yeah, so I think the whole ability to change is, once again, it's an impact and a consequence of your personality. Some people can, the gentleman who taught me all of this, he's got this incredible adaptability built into him. He can be anything to anybody. But there are people that have less of that characteristic, therefore change is very difficult for them. Not because they don't want to, it just takes more energy, more fuel, right? So when they come home, if they're trying to be someone who they're not or change strong behaviors, that's where they come back fatigued. And I think that's when we can start talking about, are you in the right role, right? If you're trying to turn yourself inside out, then that's a conversation you can have around. I think people can do things out of character, so to speak. It's just a matter of their level of motivation, commitment, and energy that they have to throw at it.
Yeah, I agree completely. It's something that I think we all consistently see as we're coaching and helping people. Yeah, let's bring this back down to the motivations now. So somebody goes, yes, I see this in myself. Yes, I see how this is impacting others. How do you use their personality or your understanding of their personality to motivate them towards behavioral change?
So there would be, motivation might be construed as internal versus external. If I'm brought in a lot to do 360, performance management projects with people, or, somebody who's not doing what they need to do in their role. So if your boss says, Mark, look, you need to change, versus you putting your hand up and you say, this is not working for me, I want to change, right? So internal, external, but the motivation can be, once again, an impact of personality. Some people are just naturally, I find the people who by their personality report are extremely assertive, let's say. That's that drive that you can't really teach. Versus some people who are a little bit less assertive might be a little bit more, well, this might create more problems than it's worth. So do I look to do something else, or do I go at this problem and fight, so to speak, fight or flight, right? But the motivation could be also, I need to do this for my family. I need to do this for, personal safety, or I need to do, like, that's motivation is such a it's a big word, I guess.
You said you talked about family there, and I've noticed managers and parents are very similar in that if
Hmm.
something works once, we try it again and again and again. And for my children, I've got two kids. They are very different. I motivate them in very different ways, working to intrinsically motivate them, internally motivate them. One of my kids, if I look and say, this is the result you're going to get, is that what you want? They now process that and say, no, that's not what I want, so I'm going to change my behavior. The other kid that I have, completely different. For that child, I need to go to them and say, this is the impact you're having on people. How does that feel? And
Yeah.
immediately they will change their behavior. If I said if I made those same statements to the wrong child, I would get nowhere with them. And yet
Yeah.
tapping into what motivates them works so well. And again, this is not about, I want to be cautious. It's not about manipulation. This is going, hey, what are my kids' goals? They want to get these results. They want to have these relationships with others.
Yeah.
So let's tap into what they want already. And that makes such a big difference in getting them where they want to be when they're internally motivated for it.
So that's a really cool story. So the grown-up version of that is on my desk right now, so to speak. It's a small construction company. There's a manager who told me that he said, I had a really good mentor, someone who sat down with me and kind of figured me out and said, this is how I did it, and based on what I know about you and your observed behaviors, why don't you try this? And that was without any kind of psychometric instrument. So that manager, his mentor was already wired a little bit differently. He saw people in a different light. So fast forward 15 years, now my client is now in a leadership role, and he has just assessed his team of 8 people, not to manipulate them, but to understand what naturally motivates them. So he can challenge them in different ways, motivate the kids in a different way, right? So, but once again, I think that's a consequence of you being a parent who is curious around child one is this way, child two is that way. Some people might be, my dad raised me, my mom raised me like this, therefore I've got 6 kids that are all getting the same message, and hopefully they're going to do what I tell them,
Yeah. Yeah.
right?
There's so much complexity. And I think this is difficult for directors, for managers. There's so much complexity in how we communicate to help others, which ends up helping the business. The business is extremely important here. But helping others so much of the time reaches the business goals. Okay. You talked about placing this mirror in front of people. Maybe give us some insight into how you do this. How do you place the mirror in front of somebody and say, are you seeing how you are impacting others here?
Part of the gift that my mentor gave me is when I was trained in with this instrument. He said to me, get out there and do as many as you can as quickly as you can. I said, why is that? And he said, well, you'll start to see patterns in people with similar characteristics that are young, old, male, female, all different cultures and races. And you start putting the stories of how someone who's really impatient, you start to you start to see people, and their stories are very similar. So that gave me the confidence of when I see somebody who's very logic first, connects with it doesn't, has a hard time containing, or sorry, an easy time containing their emotions. And that's the feedback that they're getting. So when I see that in someone, I have the confidence of saying, Mark, here's what I see in you, for example, and kind of instead of telling them about how they impact people, I know how they do because I've seen it a bunch of times. I ask them, what do you see? So now that I've given you this insight, this new kind of data pattern, how does it work for you? Tell me about that. Tell me about the feedback that you've received from bosses that you like and bosses that you don't like, from your friends, from your family. And then they start to go, oh, yeah, that's what happens. Right? So that mirror is kind of like you start the mirror from 3 feet away, and as you come closer and closer, they're going, yeah, I totally get that now. So the next part is how do we leverage the insights, right? Which gets into that. If we're all motivated to make changes, behavioral change is easy for some and it's more challenging for others. And that's where coaching and mentoring and training come in.
The something that's jumping out from what you're just saying is a tool is fantastic on its own. But without a capable, you talked about coaches and mentors, but without a capable administrator or thinker, facilitator with this tool, sometimes we're not getting the true value. And that's something that we talked about in our first conversations. You said, hiring is such a small part of this stuff. Hiring is just the tip of the iceberg. There's so much else going on. So maybe touch on that a little bit. How long did it take you to become proficient? And what's your recommendation for people? Should they get trained themselves? Should they find somebody to help them? What have you seen most valuable to people?
Well, my journey was when I was trained, it was in an intense and almost an emotional training event for me because the my mentor taught me this, and he was really focused on me and how I show up in the world. And I had just met the guy, and he told me things I just had one child at the time, and he said, "You're going to have a hard time as a parent, right? Because of your level of assertiveness." And I said, "Okay, how do you know that?" And fast forward 24 years later, it's like, yep, he nailed it. So I think that if you're going to use an instrument, if you're going to use a tool, an assessment instrument, you need to know how do you want to use it in your practice. And I think the training aspect of it is really key. There are a million different tools out there, some with limited training and some with really in-depth training and kind of showing you how to use it from application A to application Z. And that's how I looked at it. You know, I used it almost exclusively for coaching. That's how I wanted to use assessments. But then clients started to say, well, how could this be used for hiring? How could this be used, for a team application? We've got to let somebody go. How could this be used to help them find their next career? That career transition conversation. So when I started to see the tool could be used for multiple applications and I could learn and deeply understand the meaning behind this, as opposed to it's just kind of a task list of, you're this and you're that, right? I was taught what does that mean and how do you communicate the nuances, right, of what the impact of personality can be on people.
I'm thinking right now, there are probably, again, directors, managers out there, maybe HR personnel that are saying, this is great, but if I need all this training, if I need all this stuff, what can I do now? What are some tips? And this is the question I'm going to ask you, Fraser. What are some
Mm.
tips for the average person out there that says, I don't have a ton of training with this, but I'm really curious about it? What are things that they can look for in people? And based on what they're seeing in people with their personality, how can they communicate with them that will help them? Do you have any quick examples that come up?
I want to make sure that I'm understanding what you're looking for, Mark. If I'm working with a client, very often, you don't want to go from 0 to 100 miles an hour and say, look, here's the report. I'm out of here, and best of luck with this. So my approach is people start to understand this once, just like I learned, the more that they do it. So there's kind of a gradual entry into the assessment pool, and where I like to do a pilot with somebody. Let's assess an individual or help them with a hiring project or something where I can show them the results and they can see, yeah, this works. So tick that box. The next piece is who needs to learn this in the organization. When it stays within HR, it's less effective as when a greater group of leaders gets to know this, right? And this tool, the traits tool, is the one that I use, is very people, because it's an easy to read short report. It's not 50 pages. People can start to see patterns, so to speak, that even if they're not an expert, they can still glean insights into, hey, I'm just looking at this at my direct report here. Now I know something different about her, not to manipulate, but to communicate more effectively or to help them do their job better, right? So it's kind of a longer, even by my personality, I'm a partnership guy. I don't come in, do a project and leave. I'm typically attached, so to speak, for a longer period of time until they know what to do, just as I would know what to do.
Excellent. And an important point you just made is, yeah, there are maybe some tips, some patterns that we can pay attention to, but really it's about becoming that master of the tool. It doesn't take long to start noticing some of these patterns, to start picking up on some of this, to start helping people. So it doesn't necessarily require years and years and years and years of experience and training. What I'm hearing is start using assessment tools because they are objective, because it does give a different mirror to hold up to somebody's face. Secondly, that we should make sure that we're training ourselves in this, getting training so that we learn it as fast as possible, so it's more useful, and then
Yeah.
start exploring all the different applications we can use this in. Again, you mentioned hiring, firing, working with teams, 360-degree feedback. There are all these different ways that we can use the tool, and now it helps people. It helps motivate people. It helps people become a better version of themselves or a fuller version of themselves, which helps so much in work, with self-satisfaction, with feeling purpose in life. This can be such a very positive thing, but it needs to be kind of taken in. We need to commit to it and make sure that we're using it in the right way, which I appreciate because in my own life, what I've seen from other businesses is something shiny comes along. People say, this is really exciting, and it dies within a week or two and is completely forgotten about. And then
Yeah.
people are hesitant to adopt it again because they're like, oh, we tried that and it didn't work, instead of fully engaging with a tool or some type of help.
So very infrequently do I mean, I come across business leaders and I'm talking to them about this very topic of, the correlation between personality and performance. And they say, well, we did this afternoon session and a consultant came in and told me I was this and I was that and just the level of learning it sticks for a little bit, but people need to, it's almost like learning a different language. You know, you th this gives managers the ability to look at their most important asset, their people, in a different way, from how do I talk to, you know, how do I talk to Dave, to Sally, to if I'm going to bring someone on the team, I want to make sure that they share some of these similar characteristics for this reason, right? Not because we all need to be the same personality. We don't. Every job needs a little bit different combination of these characteristics to be successful. But the organizations that I've worked with for the longest period of time, they use this, right? They talk about assertiveness, right? You're not taught this in business school. You're not taught about how combinations of characteristics can create the micromanager, or or someone that just likes to talk out loud when they're thinking, as opposed to leave me alone, let me think about this, and I'll come and talk to you tomorrow, right? Those are the organizations that get it, that I really see leveraging this as an investment as opposed to just a cost, right? An HR cost, which no one wants to spend more money, but if they can invest to make their people better, that's a different story.
Yes, if something is simply a cost, it's a waste. Whereas if
Yeah.
it is an investment that does improve efficiency, it does improve team culture, all of those other things that are important for a business,
Yeah.
help our bottom line, then it's worth it. Okay, I want to respect your time. I promised I wouldn't take crazy amounts of it today. Maybe I'm going to
Yeah.
finish off with that quote again that I started off with, which is coaches can't make someone 2 inches taller, but they can help make some tweaks to communication and how to manage certain aspects in somebody's own sphere of influence, and encourage you to give contact information if somebody wants to reach out to you, Fraser. How do they do that to look into some coaching?
Yeah. Mark, can I share one story with you?
Yeah, of course.
So this whole thing around I can't make you taller, I was brought in, this was years ago, to work with an electrical contractor, really well known, very, very large. And they were having one of their project manager, branch managers was really having a hard time on the people side. No one could keep up with him on everything else, but the people side was kind of his kryptonite. And I can remember seeing his profile and I was smiling and crying at the same time because before I even talked to him about it, I knew what his thing was. I knew what was holding him back. I put it up to him and got the mirror got close really quickly with him. And he started, I've never experienced an individual go on such a learning adventure and trying new things. I worked with him as a coach for about a year. And he's gone from a project manager, branch manager to the president, CEO of the organization. And they were at the time thinking, is he going to be a fit? Can he stick around? So he was curious. He was motivated by his personality, and he took the steps and took the risks to learn more about himself, what he liked and what he didn't like, what he knew, what he didn't know. And he just I think I used that quote. I'm not going to change you, but I'm going to put a mirror up so you can look at how you want to show up differently in the world.
And become
And
stronger in the ways that are already part of you.
yeah, so he is my, he is the shining example of somebody who took that insight and ran with it and has made such a huge career path jump with it. Um, so the other part is my company is called MindWorks Consulting. I'm on LinkedIn, Fraser Engel. I think there's only one of me around, and you can reach out through LinkedIn. You can look at my website, which is just designed to really provide some information on the different HR advisory services that I provide. I love working with any client. My favorites are small to medium that are growing, never been so big, encountering problems, wanting to fix them, and just looking for long-term, support, HR support.
Great. This is great information. I will make sure that those links are in the podcast show notes so that people can click on them right away. And again, if you're listening to this, go to those show notes and you'll be able to direct yourself to Fraser. Fraser, thank you for this. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your insight. Really appreciate you being willing to invest in this podcast a little bit.
Appreciate it, Mark. Thank you very much.
Enjoy your day. Something that is so valuable to me when I do an interview like this are the little tidbits. Like I mentioned in the intro there are so many little tidbits in here. We talked about curiosity. We talked about self-awareness. We talked about motivation, our impact on others. All of these are soft skills. All of these are tools that are, again, incredibly useful for businesses. And yet, in businesses, we often see that people are not very good at these skills, and it impacts our business in negative ways. One thing I want to focus on as I finish off this podcast is the difference between a cost and an investment with returns. Fraser talked about this a little bit near the end of the podcast there. If we use a tool and we don't become really good, really proficient at using that tool, then it's simply a cost. I want to share just an analogy to bring this home. There is no such thing as a passive investor, in my opinion. We talk about passive investments. You buy real estate, you buy stock, whatever, and you let things ride, and that there's this passive investing. I don't think that exists. I think that we are either an active investor where we are actively involved in what's happening in our lives, whether it's our finances or our business, in the tools that we invest in. We need to be absolutely active in them, because if we are not active, if we are not mastering these tools, then we end up being poor. With investment circles, you're either an active investor or you're not an investor very long, because you will lose your capital. In the same way with our business, when we invest in tools, we need to make sure that we put in a time and energy investment, that it's not simply something in the HR department that can sometimes die, if I'm being really honest here. Instead, we own it and we make it part of our company culture. When we do that, a tool can come alive and make a massive difference for our businesses. I'm going to leave everything in the show notes here, so please go to the show notes for MindWorks Consulting, the website, as well as Fraser's LinkedIn profile. I'll have those links up there. Again, if you have any questions for us, please ask. You may fall into one of two categories here. One category may be that you are a company, a business that has invested in traits, has invested in objective assessment tools like this. If that's the case and you go, you know what, I think we can be using this a little better. I think we haven't mastered this yet. Please reach out. In the show notes, I'm going to give you a link that you can use to reach out to myself, to Mike Moreau, anyone that is able to help you get into more training or to answer some questions about training. Or you might be somebody who says, you know what, I haven't invested in something like this and I'm hesitant. I don't know if it is going to be worth the investment. I don't know if I have got time and energy to fully invest in this tool and get the most out of it. Well, you know what? Use that same link. Reach out to us and we can go through some of that with you, whether it's going to be helpful or not for your business, where the fit might be, and what kind of results you can get as you start utilizing these tools, because it really depends on the basic difficulties that we're having in business. We invest in tools to solve problems, and we would love to solve some problems with you. Hopefully you enjoyed the episode. I'm looking forward to connecting with you again soon. Enjoy your day.